Okay, so let's get straight into the conversation. We're starting off with Vanguard. Doctors to embark on fresh indefinite strike. The National Association of Resident Doctors, NAD, has written to the Minister of Health, Osage Ohanire, intimating him of their plans to lead doctors in the public health facilities on another round of industrial action, if, of course, its demands are not addressed. Now, the Association of Resident Doctors in Public Hospitals, in that letter, said its National Executive Council meeting had been scheduled for the 24th to 28th of January, and there would be some deliberation, saying the decision whether to embark or not would be determined in about 2 weeks. So, Devo.
Yes. Um, I don't know. When it rains, it pours, right? You just keep getting soaked, and I don't know which umbrella in this country now will prevent us from all this heavy, excessive flood coming from all sectors. Yesterday, we were discussing on the business show as to which one of the challenges is the most important, and my answer was, unlike other countries where you deal with one problem at a time, in Nigeria, you're hit from all sides at the same time. So we're not even out of the educational mess. Here come the doctors again, writing, and this is notice, which is public, which is also saying that Nigerians get ready, that all the discussions and the conclusions of the last conversations that they had with government as regards their issues. And you see, I hate to spend time talking about their problems because they're peculiar to their sector. However, in the long run, it has to do with capital and the effectiveness of their delivery. And remember, the institution we're referring to, the National Association of Resident Doctors, they form the bulk of medical personnel at that level within the country because they're at the last level of their studentship. After then, they will become GPs and further go on to become consultants. Now, there are a lot of young men and women who are at this level, at this stage, and most times when you go to the hospital, they're the ones that you meet. Now, if they lock down their tools, literally it shifts the ability of the healthcare system to be able to deliver its services. And let's break it down here slightly. One, what was last agreed had to do with the medical residency training act, the existing agreements with conmen's salary, also the some institutions before that had been owing. Those were state governments, health institutions that were owing their staff, Abia, Imo, Ondo, Ekiti, and Gombe. The non-domestication issues, literally, that had to do with and then the non-payment of the consequential adjustment on the minimum wage. Remember when the minimum wage was a battle? After we got past 30,000, there was supposed to be some alignment with people who are on higher levels. Up till date, all this hasn't been paid. Then the one that we hate to hear, the hazard allowance, okay? The new hazard allowance. Remember that was an issue during COVID that they were risking their lives and being paid pittance for that. Now, it's the same of the same. Now, whilst their issues are the same, we also know that the federal government, who is their employer, is facing the same challenge. Now, under the 2023 budget, I think healthcare got about 1 point something trillion, which is about 6%. So, literally, the federal government has not been able to up its position. And that's a projection. And we know that the federal government, for now, is literally broke if you go by the debt issues that we are facing. Now, um, what we're left with is literally every sector is going to suffer. And sometimes, when you're hearing all of this, when you're on the job as a doctor and you've been told to work literally more than 12 to 18 hours a day or continuous, or literally when you're supposed to take a break, your chief medical officer is telling you that we have patients, people are dying, this and that. Just please keep at it. I will bring people, I will support you. But you realize that nobody is coming. At that point, it's not even about raising your salary or paying you more. It's about, can I get a break? So you see, this is where it boils down for them, and they're saying as a whole and their members nationwide, very soon they will meet on the 24th of April, between the 24th and 28th of April, to take this decision. So Nigeria, I'm not surprised. many other sectors are going to go on strike. I mean, it's almost like what's going on in the UK at the moment, that
Mm,
practically all sectors within the civil service are going on strike for better working conditions. Now, I'm thinking, what are the solutions here
right.
beyond talking about the candidates and what they have in view for the people? How can, like in ASU, we can look at privatizing some of these schools to see whether private capital can come into the educational sector. For the health sector, I'm really wondering what can be done. How can we introduce capital into the health sector? That's something that I think we're going to have to look at, because we must think of sustainable solutions. Because it is a hard fact and true and an ugly fact that most Nigerians who move about 400 billion yearly out of Nigeria to America and the UK for health treatment
Mm.
gets treated by the same Nigerian doctors, from pregnancy to hematology.
Do you think, though, there are other means of NARD meeting or negotiating with the government without embarking on strikes? Because if these strikes happen, we know who is going to be worse hit.
It's this is where you talk about bad governance. You only have strikes because government has not responded in a tangible manner. So most times sectors are pushed to go on strike because that's literally the only language they understand, and that's why Nigerians need to. Sometimes I'm not tired of these strikes, because I and I'm saying this not because of government.
Mm.
Maybe you need to be in pain enough to be able to know that I need to take my government serious. Meaning, I need to put in people who will take us as a people serious, people who will answer our questions,
Mm.
people who will come in our midst and stay with us, not get elected and disappear, and all of a sudden we have to file in lines, call and call, and you end up seeing that they really don't want, because this is not a new issue. We've gone over this over and over and over and over again. So what happens is that most people, instead of bothering themselves with government, everybody reverts to Japa. And that's why at the end of the day, when you travel abroad, if you do have the money, you end up being treated by the same Nigerian resident doctor who has gotten a better working condition overseas. We can't continue like this.
All right, let's move on to this day. This is from President Buhari. I can't be blackmailed over illicit enrichment, inexplicable wealth. Now, the president has declared that no individual or group can accuse him of corruptly enriching himself since he assumed office as civilian president on the 29th of May in 2015. Now, the president, according to a release issued by his media advisor, Femi Adesina, stated for effect that the president or I do not have 1 square inch outside Nigeria. One thing that I am grateful to God for is that nobody can blackmail me. I do not have 1 square inch outside Nigeria, and I intend to stay in Nigeria when I retire from public office.
President Buhari, wonderful. All right, so maybe if we look at it from the legal perspective, he has a right to say those things as he said. Yes, above board, never lived above his means, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we would liken it to maybe a classroom teacher who claims is the best maths teacher in the whole country. And when his students write WAEC, none of them gets an A or a B or a C.
So, in other words, they fail.
I Let me say none of them get an A or B or C. And then he still says, I taught them everything they should have passed. Nobody can blame me for not teaching them. But we'll blame you because they didn't pass. That exactly is what I see in this, the moral aspect of it. Mr. President, yes, you are everything you said you are and what you will do. But can this be said of the people who worked with you? Can you say this of them? The buck stops at your desk. You promised us you will fight corruption. And it is in this same your government in the last 7 years. We've had instances. The most recent is the Accountant General, the man who reports the financial status of the country to you on a daily basis or at your whim and caprice, as they say, being tried for 167 billion naira misappropriation. Let me use their word, misappropriation. There's the case of the theft that everybody in government, including yourself, acknowledge as Minister of Petroleum on a petroleum industry, and so on and so forth that can be spoken about. Let's even take it into his house. Mr. President, in this same time, at least two of your children got degrees from foreign universities. We're going moral now. You've been to the hospital in the UK at least 5 times in those 7 years. Those are moral things that we also need to consider in saying that nobody can blackmail you. We need the stage where Nigeria is all the problems we have. We need men above board who will live and lead by example, who will say, do as I do and do as I say, and it will lead those things. But the things that make people steal money are basically these things. Okay, our universities, public universities, are closed for 5 months. Everybody wants to send their children either abroad or private university. Many of us, our salaries cannot cover this thing, so we look for alternate means. People in civil service, they do it. Our roads are not good. All of us want to buy cars that can survive the road. We look for money to do it. Diesel from 250 naira to 780 in 1 year. There is no power, public power. People will find money to do it. And so those are the things. Yes, the problems are myriad. There's a myriad of problems. It can be solved in 8 years. It can be solved in 100 years, possibly. It's possible it can be done even in 1 year. But where we were today and what we're seeing, it doesn't look like anybody can do it in 8 years. But when you're going to say things like this, we have to be circumspect about some of these things that surround these things. It's not enough to just say, okay, so because I'm above board, then so that's fine. No, Mr. President, you are the leader of that team. You should be able to speak for everybody in your government, that everybody that I worked with didn't steal one kobo. But can you do that, sir? I'm sure you cannot. And so, on that premise, I think that, let me assume that Mr. President didn't send Mr. Femi Adesina that errand to write and say that on his behalf. If it's Femi Adesina that wrote it and gave him to read. But of course, Mr. President will read anything they ask him to give him to read, just to absolve himself. Yes, he's done his best. We've had infrastructure development that hitherto we thought would never possibly have. I mean, we've seen a few movements, we've seen a few improvements here and there, but on this corruption matter, it is huge. It is huge. It is something that we should not trivialize as he has trivialized it like this. What are the things we're doing? All these allegations that we've had in the last 8 years, how many of them have gone to court, have been tried conclusively? Many of them are thrown out of court for technical reasons, not because the person is not guilty, and so on and so forth. So throwing out those cases out of court for technical reasons, in itself, there is a problem in it. That means that the people who prosecuted were not prepared. They didn't do a proper preparation before going to court. And so, for me, I think that we should be careful about this kind of things that people write for our leaders to go and read. The leaders themselves should be circumspect about saying it, because the perspective with which people outside like me would look at it, I've looked at it from perspective of, for example, my children were at home for 2 years, they've lost 2 academic years because the universities were closed. But his went abroad to go and get a degree and came back here. Living in Nigeria for him is not a big deal. I can't recall if General Babangida had lived anywhere outside Nigeria since he left government. I can't recall if Abdusalami Abubakar had lived anywhere outside Nigeria since he left government. I can't recall if late Ernest Shonekan lived anywhere outside except Nigeria since he left government. Even the person he succeeded, Jonathan, has he lived anywhere outside Nigeria? So living in Nigeria is not a big deal. Some of us have made that pact with Nigeria that we would live here. We will be passionate about Nigeria. But things like this upset some of us when we hear them. That we are making it look like it's a big deal. It's not a big deal to live in Nigeria. Why are we making a big deal of it? But let's move on.
All right, we have some messages coming through. The WhatsApp number again is 0809 444 Dami from Ikorodu says, a mentor has warned me that when you become powerful, Often it's not what you do, it's what is done in your name that becomes the problem. And Cisco Delgado says, good morning, Olakunle, for good analysis on what the president stated about being corrupt free. Okay. Victor Sheon says, in this age and time, corrupt officials don't have to steal in their own names. They can afford the lifestyle they want by living off those that they've given influence or the opportunity. All right. And keep the messages coming. 0809 444 Let's take a quick break and we'll continue with Freshly Pressed right here on Smooth 98.1.
Smooth 98.1.
Okay, you can take 7.
Okay,
The next
7
story.
next.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, she doesn't like putting political stories.
What's it say?
Nothing but good
INEC.
vibes. Worked hard from January to
Then
After
if
seven,
there's
let's
now
time,
we're
4.
letting loose in
Okay,
December.
7 to 4,
Block
please.
parties
and then
speed shows,
3.
now you get
Okay.
me.
4
Superstars and
because of that
showstoppers won't miss
fan
me.
fee.
Fashion shows and art
Oh,
shows,
yeah, the.
beach parties and
Oh, I
more.
thought the Agricon was
We
3.
did there.
Yes,
Me
they're
and
both
Oh, they're
agri.
both okay. Okay.
in December,
4 and
and
3.
if they no day,
Mm.
we're
Okay.
turning up anyway.
So we'll go on to
Exciting
7
new
and
things
then
are
come back.
happening because First Bank's got us vibing every day. This life's for living, and we're all for that positive energy. It's going to be an ember to remember. Vibes on vibes. This December is a vibe. Follow us on social media for details, invites, and vibes on vibes. You first, First Bank.
Smooth 98.1.
This is the Smooth Breakfast Show.
Just the two of us.
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. It's Zibi here and my analyst for the day, Devo and Alakunle. Let's go on to The Nation. INEC gets political parties nod to deploy BVAs for polls. The political parties under the Inter-Party Advisory Council have warned against any plot by those it deems anti-democratic forces to remove the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, over alleged false assets declaration just a few weeks to the general elections. Now, the parties have also backed the decision of the Commission to deploy the bimodal voter accreditation system for the polls.
Yes. That was knocked off in court recently when the case to remove the INEC chairman lost its way at the magistrate court, found its way to the high court, and then was knocked off again at the Court of Appeal. So what it shows you is that there are some people who they are referring to, these 18 parties, which are literally the bulk of other parties that are not among the majority, are saying, who are these anti-democratic forces? Why are they after the INEC chair, Professor Mahmoud? What has he done wrong? And it's obvious that they see that he is pushing for free and fair elections as a legacy. Now, they also gave the nod for the use of the deployment of the BVAS, which is supposed to be the latest innovation following the passage of the electoral reform. Remember last time, even though they came up with opportunities for free and fair elections, as long as it did not have legislative backing, it couldn't be tenable when you go to courts. And I need people to understand how important this is, because before now, the last election, which was in 2019, we had the use of the incident form. The incident form was that sheet of paper you see at the polling unit that once the card reader, if it failed, the officials would have to make a right present day list of people who were present at the election. Now that list, because it's written in pen and paper, develops kwashoko along the way to the consolation units, and then figures change. So this was the opportunity that many dark forces, politicians, would optimize to be able to change the vote in their favor. So we need to be careful and watch out, because the BVAS, what the BVAS does is that it first accredits you quickly with either your biometrics, either your eye or your fingerprints, and then you then go to vote immediately, one. And at that point, it also sends a direct transmission of the results, which will be announced at the polling unit, to the collation center. So hopefully this time round, people will not be able to perform magic at the polling unit. However, we need to be careful of these anti-democratic forces. Yes, that's a big word, but we need to be careful about these people who are afraid of a free and fair election. These are the same people that the CBN was targeting in terms of introducing the Naira redesign and the limit on cash withdrawal, because it's on good notice from the NSA that some people have stocked up cash to be able to buy the vote come 20 sorry come February next month when we go to the polls. Remember when they asked Buhari in the UK, Oga, are you still for the uh, diary design? He says, yes, we will not allow anybody with thugs or hoodlums and with cash to be able to take over the seat of governance in this country. Powerful statements. Yes, I know some people will say that he was speaking tongue in cheek, but I think for those who understand politics, we all know what he was referring to. We're not children anymore in this game. Nigerians usually default on cash. And I'm hoping that the beavers, to some large extent, will not fail us in this election, because we don't need to give these dark forces any excuse to be able to render elections inconclusive or even nullify them, all in the name of it's not working. We need this election to work because Nigeria is in a very bad place, extremely bad place for the 200 million of us. We need, what do you call it? The elections that we can be proud of, to be able to say that, okay, this person won uh, among the majority and the voice of the Nigerian people actually had its day.
All right, let's move on to Punch. Federal government cushions farm losses for 200 Gombe farmers. The federal government, through the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, has distributed quick win farm inputs to 200 farmers in Gombe, and this is to cushion the effects of the flood. Now, speaking during the handing over of the inputs organized by the Federal Department of Agriculture Horticulture Division, the Deputy Director, Lord Banju, who was represented by the Chief Work Superintendent, said the effort was geared towards ameliorating the hardship that farmers were experiencing.
Um, this is one of the things today that's pleasing to hear, to read and hear. We all know last year was, in terms of agriculture, was a very bad one for Nigeria, and there have been um, various levels of anticipated fears about food availability this year, right? Don't Let us recall also that I think 2 weeks ago we were talking about the supplementary budget where the Mr. President was asking for some monies to help solve that problem that I was saying, why don't you consolidate everything into one budget and all that. Now, so I'm assuming that this is part of the result of that supplementary budget, that the monies that they are spending to do this is coming from there. Now, this is done in Gombe State, and we know that the flood happened in 19 or 23 states.
Mm.
23,
Yeah, about two-thirds.
thereabout. 2/3 of all the states in
country.
Nigeria was affected by the flood. So if they've done this in Gombe, right, I would expect that they extend the same thing to all the other states. At least if we cannot catch up with the expected yield for this year, we will sometime down the line be able to supplement with what the farmers are able to do with this aid that they are getting from government now. It's pleasing to see this. It's about government responsiveness. I want, the only thing is that, but for government, what they call that in red tapeism, this should probably have come earlier, maybe as early as October or so,
Right.
last year, so that we will just manage to squeeze this into the harvest of this year. It's a good one. It's a pleasant thing to hear, and let's hope that farmers will make good use of this thing, of this aid, and starter packs, as they call them, to boost their products. And the most important thing then would then be to solve the actual problem the flooding, so that we won't have to go this route every year.
Every 2 years when they open the dam in Cameroon.
Right. We've got some messages coming through. This one says, "Good morning. Well done for the analysis. The president does not have the moral right to make such statements until he can affirm the same for the people in his cabinet. What can we do with the seeming uprightness with zilch influence?" And that is from Mary. Kofowarala says, okay, I want to correct Devo about NAR. The resident doctors are not medical students. They are already certified medical doctors who have decided to specialize in a specific area. I certainly agree with his take. The working conditions have further worsened due to the dwindling manpower. Doctors in the public sector have to work multiple shifts with hardly any break or leave, and it's only going to get worse if the issues resulting in brain drain are not addressed. Now, speaking about that, on Lagos Talks this morning, we have a doctor coming through and joining us on the conversation. We're talking about the healthcare sector in Nigeria. It's a wide conversation, and you certainly should be a part of it. Yemi says, it was education hitch, today's health issues. What will it be tomorrow? Even the infrastructural developments were done at the expense of our future. All right. And let's see. I've got another message. This is from Anthony. Anthony says, removing the INEC chairman is one problem, and removing the BVA's idea is 10 problems. They shouldn't, in their desperation, or they should, in their desperation, think twice. All right. And yes, this one is from Dami. Dami says, with response to the story coming from Gombe, Dami says, maybe it was delayed so the farmers don't sell it and use it for December. Okay. Well, that's all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you so much, Devo. Thank you, Lakunle, for being on the show with me.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it. Do stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.